Well, welcome everybody, and thank you, ZJ. I love that. I'm actually going to go back and read both of those now. I feel like that's my mission for October, to go back and read those. So tonight we're honored to have the Honorable Judge Debra Goldstein. Debra writes Kensington's Sarah Blair mystery series, including 3 Treats Too Many, 2 Bites Too Many, 1 Taste Too Many. She also authored Should Have Played Poker and IPPY Award-winning Maize in Blue. Her short stories, which have been named Agatha, Anthony, and Derringer finalists, have appeared in numerous periodicals and anthologies, including Alfred Hitchcock Mystery Magazine, Black Cat Mystery Magazine, and Mystery Weekly. Debra serves on the national boards of Sister in Crime and Mystery Writers of America, and is president of the Southeast chapter, I believe, and past president of Sisters in Crime's Guppy chapter. So I'm going to turn this over to Debra Goldstein.
Thank you. I feel like I'm partially home because I have 2 sons. One lives in Fort Collins, one lives in Denver. So I do come in and out of your neighborhood a little bit, except for recently. Tonight, what I was asked to talk about is really my journey to following my passion. And for all of us, listening to all of you and your writing, I think you too have a passion. But mine took a long time to come to the forefront. Let me go back and start over. But I'm going to go all the way back, in fact. I want to take you through my whole journey. And I promise not to take the whole evening to do it, as many years as I have lived. But when I was very young, I did not speak clearly. My brain went way too fast for my mouth. Of course, my mother dragged me to every speech therapist you could think of, and they all had a different idea of how to get me to slow down. But one of the ways they did it was to ask me to hit something hard every syllable. It's very boring, don't you think? I thought it was. So the next thing they opted was I should read poetry aloud. My father and I read poetry every evening. And I can't say that I'm a poetry lover, but I learned to love words doing that. And I want to tell you, I came up with a mantra that to this day I follow. I'm going to shorten it, but it's from my favorite poem, and I will then explain why I follow it. So this is the only thing I'll read to you tonight, because I can't sure do it from memory. From John Greenleaf Whittier's The Barefoot Boy. Blessings on thee, little man, barefoot boy with cheek of tan. Oh, for boyhood's painless play, sleep that wakes in laughing day. All too soon these feet must hide. Ah, that thou couldst know thy joy ere it passes, barefoot boy. I came out of that, as a 6-year-old or so, with 2 conclusions. One, I never wanted to have to wear shoes. I was going to always go barefoot because obviously it was a confining experience. Now, flash forward, the only time I ever run barefoot is through a carpeted area. So, some things don't last. The other thing I came out with was I should never be pigeonholed. I should always be thinking out of the box, because my father explained the story to me. And that has stuck with me forever. And moving right up along, do you remember when all of you were in 1st and 2nd grade and they did the Thanksgiving play? Some of you, I bet, were the Pilgrims, and some of you were the Indians. My mother in 1st grade made me the most beautiful costume. It was lovely, but because of the way I spoke, they wouldn't give me a speaking role. So I stood there like a dead idiot. I was not happy. So the 2nd year, 2nd grade, they had a student teacher. And you all know how eager and young student teachers are. Well, in this particular case, the student teacher was giving everybody a chance to decide what role they wanted. I knew they'd never give me the lead. I knew they'd never give me the 2nd lead. So I wrote down that I'd like to be the announcer, because I figured nobody would ask for that role. And I was right. So they gave me the announcer, and the older teacher says to the student teacher, how are you doing that? Nobody will understand her. It's only the announcer. She'll speak for a little while and she'll be fine. Okay, so they let me have it. Well, the other thing is an eager student teacher made the mistake of having the play be 2 acts. Do you know what it's like trying to move second graders around on a stage for 2 acts? There's going to be a big gap in the middle. So I wrote a poem. And I went up to the student teacher and I said, you know, you have a problem. There's a long time here. Maybe we should do something in between. And she said, and what do you think we should do? And I said, I think you should have a poem. And I just happened to have one. So she let me read it, even though the older teacher said, who's going to understand it? I want you to know I spoke clearly, slowly, and perfectly. And that's how I wrote myself into the biggest part in the show. That was the beginning of my writing career. Now I'm going to flash forward and take myself a lot of years forward. I'm finishing high school and I think I want to be a journalist. And I'm thinking I'm going to go to a school that has very good journalism, programs, but very strict ones. I'm thinking Syracuse, I'm thinking Michigan State, I'm thinking Northwestern. But my high school journalism teacher said to me, no, you're never going to be that kind of journalist. But it wasn't a downer. It was, you're going to be more creative. You'll be thinking out of the box. You need to go, because I was living in Michigan at the time, you need to go to the University of Michigan. That's where Marshall McLuhan is. That's where all the thinkers are. And that's where everything's going on now. You know, sometimes in your life, a person comes along and something they say makes the difference. And in this case, at the very last minute, I sent my check into the University of Michigan. And it did make the difference, except when I got there, I discovered I loved to stay up till 2 o'clock. Domino's still delivered till 2 o'clock. And do you know how the first year they give you all 8 o'clocks? Well, here I am having to go to the furthest point on campus at 8 a.m. for the one class I'm a little nervous about, because I'm not good with language, but I had somehow managed to test into the last possible term of Spanish. And so I was not going to miss that class because I didn't want to have to take 2 years. Now, I'm also taking English classes. I'm taking everything and I'm doing things my way. If you go and look at my Michigan record, if you pull 2 years worth of my records, I discovered that, remember the mainframes of the big computers? Well, to register back then, because this is the 70s, you had to come in and stand in line. I don't like waiting. I discovered if you walked in the back door, you could just drop your papers off. So if you look up my things, it says that Mickey Mouse approved everything for 2 years and my major was beachcombing. I finally decided after in my third year that I better find out if I can get out of here at some point in the next year. So I went in and I showed the guy my things, and I've been taking all the classes I wanted because every 9 months I changed my major. One time it was acting, one time it was this, but it was always English solid through. Anyway, the guy looks at me and he says, you have enough for an English major. You have everything for a history double major, except how did you miss 102? You've taken the 300s, the 400s, the 500s. I said, because 101 was boring. So I went back and took it. I had a father who, as I said, taught me poetry, but he also told me that, there were certain things he was hoping I would do. My dad felt that I should do one of two careers. He felt I should either be a nurse or a teacher because he wanted me to be in a position that I could afford a life if I had to be on my own. I'm sure a lot of you heard that from fathers too, and mothers. My father's particularly. Well, we all were in agreement that if we wanted to see people live, I should not be a nurse. So it became definite that maybe I should go to teaching, but I didn't want to. So I had told him no. And I had taken everything but teaching classes. And then I discovered at the University of Michigan and in the state of Michigan, for 20 hours, you could get a teaching certificate to teach in high schools. And only 8 of those had to be classroom instruction on the campus. You could do 12 hours of student teaching. I thought that sounded fun. So I took the 8 hours and then I went back and I taught in my old high school. And the 2 things I learned there, which went into my writing, were they didn't give me all the honors English classes that I thought they'd put me in. No, they had me teaching the lowest levels. So I learned how you had to make it interesting. I'm a game player, so instead of telling the kids to read the book, I played things like Hollywood Squares because, I'd ask, how many liars do we have in the room? And all the hands would go up. So they all started reading because they either wanted, if you remember that game, it was 9 people, 2 contestants, and they would either stump them by telling a lie or they would tell the truth. Well, all these kids were reading like mad because they didn't want to get caught out by their friends. So they wanted to either have a good lie or a bad lie. So I understood then that you have to make a story interesting. And I did. Okay, this is now December of the year, and I have more than enough credits to graduate. I decided I wanted a job in publishing, and my other goal, I was going to leave college early and graduate 8 months early with the idea that I'd go to New York immediately, get a job in publishing, and get on Jeopardy. Those were my goals in life at that age. So 2 days after I graduated, I went to New York with my resume, and I was very lucky. I wasn't sure it would work out. So by day I looked for a job, by night I typed law school applications. But I was lucky because my goals worked out and I suddenly realized I didn't want to be at the bottom of the publishing heap. It was kind of dull and I didn't want to have to spend a lot of time working my way up. So in the fall, I went to law school. I picked my law school kind of like an English major. I got on a plane in Jersey, in New York, and it was snowing. It was snowing in Pennsylvania. It was snowing in the next state. It was snowing in every state except when I came through the air into Atlanta. And there was the most beautiful red clay. It was just like Margaret Mitchell had written about. It was exactly her description. I didn't know it was the day after one of their horrible tornado type things, and all the land is more beautiful than ever the day after because everything's been wet. Anyway, I then go on. Now, let me quickly go forward again. And now I'm a lawyer. I started out doing tax for General Motors, hated it, and decided I really wanted to work for people. I wanted to go cleanse myself for 2 years from the corporate world. And I went into the Department of Labor with the idea of 2 years and I'd be out of there. I got into a case of first impression for equal pay, and 2 years became 5 years by the time the case was done and I talked about it. But all the time of this, I'm talking about wanting to write, but I'm not doing anything. I talk about it. I have an idea. I have an idea about the University of Michigan. I really think I can tell a funny story, but I don't do it. Instead, I'm writing the most boring briefs and articles and things. And then I get an opportunity. I have an odd case, and I get to write a very colorful brief. A gentleman was accused of misusing government funds for to take his girlfriend on a house hunting trip. And he left his wife and 7 kids at home. And when the girlfriend got mad, she turned him in. And so but he had a high level job. So I was doing the labor case against him. And his defense was that he was a Piscataway Indian. Well, I did a little homework. And one of the things, like I know Margaret does with her procedurals, is you've got to do your research. So I sent investigators to talk to the Chief Red Feather, and there really was a Chief Red Feather who was head of the Piscataway Indians. I flew up to the Bureau of the Indian Affairs and Tribal things in Washington because they keep rolls of who's active on some of these Indian tribes. And I did my homework. There were only 2 books written on the Piscataway Indians, and I got both of them. Did you know it's the only Roman Catholic tribe? So when the guy tried telling me, hey, it's where the blanket is. Whoever I'm sharing the blanket is, that's who I'm married to. I knew better. Anyway, I ended up writing tongue-in-cheek, but very seriously, a very good brief in that case. And it must have been good enough because when it ended up helping me become a judge. The average age for my judgeship was 58 and I got it at 36. Now, I want to flash forward a little further. I'm still talking about writing. And I think a lot of you may have been in that boat. You know you want to write, but you don't sit down and do it. And the more I talked about it, two things happened. Two more people came into my life. I was the one who wrote all the skits and all the funny things for everybody, every club, every organization that I was active in. And I wrote a skit for Leadership Birmingham. You were supposed to come up with a wonderful project. Well, instead of coming up with a project, our little study group couldn't come up with anything because we had two guys who just only wanted their certificate. I wrote the skit about how we could not accomplish anything. And I put the words in their mouths. And how many of your friends and how many of the people that you've stolen ideas about or characteristics from don't recognize themselves in your writing? Neither of these guys realized these were their words, but we were having a run through. And as we did it, the gentleman in the next room who was married to one of the hostess that night had been hearing her complain for weeks about these guys. And he's trying not to laugh, but afterwards he comes up to me and Leo says, you should write. And I looked at him and I went, and he said, no, you really should. You're funny and you put it together well. And sometimes somebody is so serious and you respect them so much that again, he influenced me to pick up my pen and try to start writing again. But I was not good at sitting down and doing it. And I talked again about it. And then finally a friend said to me the following: I'm going to offer you my condo at the beach. We're going to go down for the weekend. I'm only going to bother you during the evening for dinner. Other than that, write to your heart's content. Leave Joe and the 4 kids home and you and I go. But I want you to understand there's one caveat. If you don't write and if you don't do something, while we're there, I never want to hear you that you want to write again. Well, I wrote all weekend on legal pages. I wrote 85 pages of that murder mystery on the University of Michigan campus that I was talking about. And Maize in Blue, was the first book I ever had published, but I want you to know out of those 85 pages, 5 of them are in the book. So that sometimes when you write, you don't write too well that first time, so you better edit. Again, that book was still sitting around even though I'd started writing it. But I got to a point that I was busy with other things, but I kept writing on it. And I finally thought it might be ready. And a friend dragged me to the Alabama Writers Conclave. And one of the things I will advise people to do is take classes like crazy. Take anything you can, because you learn something, even one item out of everything. Or a meeting like this, there may be one thing that resonates with you. And I took everything, but my friend dragged me to this Writers Conclave, and there they had some really good classes. And they also had contests. I am competitive by nature. I decided I could enter and maybe knock out some of the wins the following year. So in 2010, I entered first chapter. I entered for short story. I entered, you name it, I entered every category they had. I was sure they were going to call my name for the fiction stuff. I won in nonfiction for an essay, Maybe I Should Hug You, which dealt with what happens when we turn 50 and we start having our arms get flabby and our friends start having illnesses and we start becoming our mothers. And now, mind you, this whole thing was maybe 5 paragraphs, but More Magazine picked it up and ran it online. That was the beginning. The following year, I finally finished the mystery, and I have to tell you how it got published because it was an accident. And part of publishing is luck and being in the right place at the right time. I was hosting a panel. I was president of the Women's Network in Birmingham, had about 115 women in the room. I was hosting 4 women authors, all different genres. And I think that when you are the moderator, you should be like the wall behind me, kind of gray and dull. Well, I'm hostessing them. We get to the end, and one of the people in town raises her, for the question period, raises her hand, says, tell us what you're writing. And I went, oh, you're talking about that essay. Thank you. And I mentioned it. Let's get back to these women. Another hand goes up. Tell us what else you're writing. And my answer, well, I have a mystery and I think it's finally ready to see the world. And then I went back to those people. And I don't know about you guys, but I was extremely attached to my BlackBerry in those days. And a few hours later, my BlackBerry went off and I looked at it and it said, my name is so-and-so and I am the publisher for Chalet Publishers. One of my best friends was in the audience apparently at a meeting today, and she says there's a judge with a mystery and that she thought she'd seen your writing, would like me to look at it. Now, I want to ask you guys, if somebody asked you who was a publisher that they'd like to read your book, if you wanted them to, what would you answer? Yes. My question was, how did she want me to wrap it? Red ribbon, blue ribbon, I was ready to send it. What did she do? No, send it in an email. And this is what I want the heading to read, so I'll know it's, it's something I should read and whatever. So I did, Joan's Friend's Mystery. I sent it and I don't think anything else about it. About a week later, our children are in town. And you have to understand, when I married my husband, he came with a 6 and an 8-year-old. By the time this is happening, quite a bit, and the twins, the Holy Terrors came later. So we have some grandchildren, and they are running way ahead of us at Vulcan. And if any of you ever read the Anne George Mysteries, you know that Vulcan is this big statue that used to moon the city because of the way it was placed. It was from the World's Fair, and it is just as a big statue, but it's harder to get from the parking lot to Vulcan than it is to get up the whole Vulcan. So anyway, I'm kind of dragging behind. My BlackBerry goes off and I look at it and I stop and I look at it and I went, oh shit. And my daughter turns around and she says to me from way above, you don't talk like that with children around. And I'm looking and they're a mile ahead of me. They can't hear me. So I repeat, oh shit. Now she is sure I've had a heart attack. So she comes back down the steps to where I am. And I turn the BlackBerry so she can read it. It only has one sentence. My partner Joy and I have read Maize and Blue and would like to offer you a contract. That's how easy I thought publishing was. I said yes. Well, a funny thing happened. They brought it out in April of 2011 because a small publisher can publish quickly. They brought it out. I was set to be at Malice and all these places in 2012 speaking engagements, but they decided they were going out of business. And they did go out of business. So I had to put it back up, so that makes me a hybrid author, because in order to keep it alive, I had to put it back up. But they gave me back the the files and everything so I could do so. Because it was, so that was going to be my first series that now became a standalone. I tried and I asked every agent, every conference I was now going to, and nobody, they said, you sold too many and we don't want to, it's time to do something else. So I was told, write something different. That's when I wrote Should Have Played Poker, Carrie Martin and the Mahjong Players Mystery. And I went to a conference and I pitched it. And the first time I pitched it, the first hour, I was praised, but I was told no, they didn't want it. I asked the editor who was there, was an editor and an agent on each of these things. It was a Killer Nashville. And I asked them, you just praised it to high heaven. You don't want to read it? She says, no, because I'm here to buy a particular type of book. And you have a young lawyer in it and it doesn't fit what I'm looking for. Okay. 2 hours later, I pitched it again. And the way they do it is they read a page and they get critiqued. Well, this time the editor said, I like it. Yeah, I'll look at the rest of it. Again, I'm still agentless. I still don't know the system. Well, a week later, they bought Should Have Played Poker. So now I have had, a thing. But I need to tell you that all this time, I'm still sitting on the bench, but I really want to write. I'm loving it. But I'm keeping my two careers separate. And as I'm keeping my two careers separate, I realized that I was in trouble because they bought that book in August of 2014. Their calendar for 15 was filled. It was coming out in 16. Now I want you to picture me all in black, sitting a little above you, kind of stern. I've been on the bench over 20 years at this point, and I'm almost reaching the average age. I have those lawyers trained. At the end of a hearing, I go, is there anything further? And they darn well better say, no, Your Honor, and I would do a standard closing. And I had a really good lawyer in front of me on this particular day. I looked and I said, is there anything further? He answered properly, no, Your Honor. And I couldn't even get the closing out of my mouth before his client said, yes, there's one more thing. And I looked at the lawyer, and the lawyer did this. And when he did that, I knew we were in trouble. He couldn't control the client. So I looked seriously at the client and I said, yes, sir, what is it? And he said, Your Honor, I just want you to know one thing. No matter how you rule, I'm gonna buy your book. And I don't think he did, because I ruled against him. But I went home that night and I said to my husband, we got the last kid out of school. Our obligations are pretty much done. Let's run the numbers. I can stay on the bench because it's a lifetime appointment, or I can follow my passion. And I don't know how well it's going to go, but I can follow my passion. We ran the numbers, and the next morning I walked in, and you have to understand there aren't very many females. I walked into my colleagues and I said, I will take no more cases. I will work out my docket. And when I work out my docket, I'm gone. And they said, what are you going to do? Because they were sure I was sick. I explained, no, I wasn't. Then they thought I was crazy. And they said, what are you going to do? I said, I'm going to follow something I really want to do. And they said, how are you going to feel? What are you going to do? Again, I said, believe me, I'll be busy. I'll be so busy, I won't know what to do. And that was 5 years ago, roughly. That's when I really became serious. But now I run into a problem because they bring out Should Have Played Poker, and I've now left my job. And guess what? 5-Star decides it's not going to publish any more mysteries. So now my series, again, I'm orphaned. And everybody I talk to says, you write something different. And that seems to be a standard line. If something's not going well, write something different. And I am writing short stories during this period. So I decided I've been writing traditional with cozy elements, i.e. small communities. I'm a Yankee who lives in the South, and I really like to write Southern towns. I know them from my litigation days. And I really don't think I want to write a cozy, except run into a problem. And the problem is cozies often have an amateur sleuth. Okay, I can do that. They have a small town, create a little Southern town. They have food, ew. They have cooking, ew, ew. I mean, I'm the one that they gave a kitchen shower and asked if I could identify what was in the boxes. Cooking's not my forte. If we eat out, if I cook more than 2 nights in a row, this pandemic has been horrible because in the past, if I cooked more than 2 nights in a row, Joel wanted to go out for dinner. In fact, at one of the times we were looking for the boy who lives in Denver because I said something about dinner. We couldn't find the 4-year-old. He was standing by the car ready to leave. So that's my cooking style. So that wasn't going to work. So then I decided, okay, I'm going to do, no, I can't do crafts because I'm the type that sews whatever I'm making to myself and makes a hole when I cut the two apart. You can ask the sewing teachers. So, baking, oh no. I mean, isn't an oven something you keep your plasticware in? So, okay, this was not going well. And then I thought about it. And I'm going to ask all of you, how many of you, there's got to be some of you there who don't like cooking, crafts, or baking too, right? Or it's not your forte. Well, I figured there had to be readers out there. So I created Sarah Blair, and Sarah Blair for the Kensington series, which started out with 3 books. It's already, it's now contracted for 5. This is One Taste Too Many, the first. And I have to explain to you about Sarah. Sarah was a character who is married at 18, divorced at 28. She doesn't really know what she's going to do now. Her husband walked out for a woman named Jane, who Sarah calls the bimbo. The only thing she got out of the whole marriage, if you can see it, is this cat. Rah-Rah, the cat, is the only thing she walked away from. Well, I'm not giving anything away, but on the first page, her ex-husband, the rat, gets it because Sarah has a twin sister, and her twin sister, her forte is being a chef. She knew from when she was little she wanted to be a chef. So Sarah has to, anyway, the ex-husband dies, and allegedly because he ate a bite of the chef's award-winning rhubarb crisp. So Sarah has to solve the murder, get her sister off the hook, or for a woman who finds being in the kitchen more frightening than murder, Sarah might have to take her sister's part in a cooking exhibition. Now, I want you to know, just like most cozies, that book does have recipes. Jell-O in a can, spinach pie made with Stouffer souffle. In other words, I write fun comedy books that are the kind of thing you read at the beach. That came out, it was a Woman's World pick immediately in January of 19. 6 months later, they brought out Two Bites Too Many. And in this one, things are a little better. Her sister is up for a loan from the bank and she doesn't get it for a new restaurant. But unfortunately, the bank president is found dead in a locked room with only one person in there with him. And it's their mother, Maybelle, who has the blood on her hands. So once again, you get partially a family theme. You get obviously the animals, and this time I've added a dog because I know dogs. I had to research cats, but I know dogs, so you have to add a dog. And this time, Sarah comes back because she has to solve the murder and get her mother off the hook. And there's other things like the blessing of the animals and more recipes. 2-3 weeks ago, Three Treats Too Many came out. And the beauty of it is the research, the fun, and I'm finding joy in writing. Three Truths Too Many, I don't know if you can see here, but oops, I'll get it back in the picture. R.I.P., rest in peace. This one has recipes of some soups and things because, but this one includes a lot of things. For someone whose greatest culinary skill is ordering takeout, now Sarah is at a point that she's actually part owner of a restaurant because she owns the building. But the restaurant's not getting open because poor Sarah's, they just can't get the final inspection. But Bimbo has opened a restaurant across the street and it got not only inspected, it's had its grand opening and it's doing dynamite business because they have a wonderful vegan chef and the vegan recipes everybody's going crazy for. It's going real well for them until the vegan chef, Riley, gets killed. And one of Sarah's best friends is the one leaning over the body. So they have to get into it. But I'm having fun because I wanted a veterinarian practice in this one. So I did my homework. I went and shadowed a vet for a day so I could get it a little more accurate. But I also wanted a motorcycle group, but not your typical motorcycle group. Because you put things in your brain and you remember them later. And I had taken a class on magazine writing. And when I took the class, an older couple who was a principal at a school and a teacher said, could you take notes for us next week? We're going to be away for a long weekend. And I said, sure, where are you going? They said, we're going on a motorcycle trip. I said, excuse me? They said, yeah, we belong to a community motorcycle group. So it's not the stereotype you think of. It was a group of teachers and educators who every year would pick a location, ride their motorcycles, and so they had group people who were decked out to the nth degree, and they had these other teachers who were just having fun. And I decided, well, why don't I mix all this together? So I've got a cozy that and I went and talked to people on motorcycling. So I have a little of everything in this book. But that's the goal, to combine and to make it fun. For me, the passion of writing is figuring out the whodunit, putting in the clues, and following my path. For any of you who are writing, I think that part of it is we have to admit that we want to do it. We have to agree we want to do it. And we have to educate ourselves to improve because none of us are good at the beginning. Well, maybe some are, but I wasn't. I hope that the character evolves, and I know my writing's evolving. And it's been a journey to passion. And I guess in February, Guideposts liked it enough that they ran a complete article on my journey. So this has been just one of the craziest rides I have ever been on. I'm having as much fun meeting all these people that I used to read. I'm having as much fun meeting groups like this one tonight, being active in the different groups like Chris and Margaret has been. But it is a joy for me because I'm doing what I really want to do. And, you know, getting rewarded for it, or at least getting paid. So I'm happy, can't complain. But I'd like to open this up for questions because I think I've just kind of skimmed the top and you might have some questions that I could probably address a little more intelligently. Anybody?
Yeah, so anybody that has a question, if you can raise your hand, we'll unmute you and you can ask your question. Bruce? Oop. I can't unmute him. Where is Matthew?
He might be able to unmute himself.
Can you get?
Here we go.
Yep. You should be able to unmute yourself.
I did, yeah. It just didn't seem to take right away. So did you, I mean, you had 20 years, I think, of at least of a judgeship.
Yes.
Did you consider that at any point of, you know, writing a character who's a judge?
Mm-hmm. I did, Bruce. I actually did think about that. But when I started writing my books, I was still on the bench. And I really wanted to keep the two separate. So I was afraid, I just didn't think suspense or thriller would work. But I did use parts of my life from before that because I was afraid the judge part wouldn't work because everything I was doing, I had to send up to Washington to get approved, you know, to get everything vetted and approved, which was crazy because they got so used to me from outside activities that it's called an outside activity form, and we're all very familiar with it now with John Bolton in the book. I had to do the same kind of thing, except can you imagine them getting 3 treats too many? They should have played poker. Anyway, I said, you know, here's Maize and Blue. What do you want to do about it? But I did in my short stories. In my short stories, I started writing some of the funny things. Like I wrote about some of the lawyer stuff in my first published short story, Legal Magic, was about a young lawyer whose mother makes him take a case because she's one of the Mahjong players, and one of the other Mahjong players is accused of keying a car. And she has to take the case. And he's not a very good lawyer, but he gets around it. And he wins. Okay, I'm giving you the whole story right here. But he does win in the twist. And this is an example of something you can do later. I love the Mahjong players, but I didn't know where to put them. But I liked the young lawyer too. When I wrote Should Have Played Poker, that protagonist is a young female lawyer, young corporate lawyer. Well, duh. That's what I was when I first started out. So I could write that truthfully. But then I knew that she was going to be serious because in that book, her mother has abandoned her. She comes back after 26 years and is killed shortly thereafter. The protagonist has to find out why her mother came back, why she left, and why she was killed. While she's doing that, that's kind of heavy. So I needed comedy on this side because I was writing, that's how I felt. You had to have a balance. I remembered my Mahjong players. I brought them into the scene. I put them now into a senior citizens home and I made them the comedy. So that you can take characters from other places and bring them together. I am just now beginning to use more of my judicial things. And I'm gonna just, a quick sideline. I went to a conference a few years ago. And Elaine Viets, who some of you probably know, who is now writing the Richmond series of the investigator, the fire investigator. Well, she said that she couldn't, the first book is really a disguised version of what she went through after her stroke and the doctor who misdiagnosed and everything. And she kills him. And she said she couldn't write about that for 11 years, but now she could bring it out. And sitting next to her was Alexia Gordon, who is a doctor, but who's doing more administrative stuff. And Alexia writes a murder mystery with music and more of a cozy and some supernatural. And Alexia said, looked up here and says, well, it's been 6-7 years. Is that why I can't write about medicine yet? And I felt the same way. So I'm getting to that point. There'll be more law.
Okay.
Another question?
Margaret?
Debra, if you do move into some kind of a legal work, would you be considering legal thrillers, or would you be considering a cozy with attorney judge type characters?
I think it would be more suspense. I don't really know where it will go yet because I'm having so much fun writing this series. I mean, this series just started out and it was funny and it worked for me. I started writing it. I wrote about half the book for One Taste Too Many, and it was just flying. When things work, I understand the Shirley Jackson thing because when my short story, The Night They Burned Miss Dixie, I wrote that in a space of about 4 hours. That's the one that was up to the Agatha and the Anthony and has done so nicely. When it works, my writing is beautiful. When it doesn't work, it is horrible. And I ended up writing and finishing the book and hating it because something was wrong. I put the wrong character as the person who did it. I ended up going back and throwing out half of the book when it finally came to me what I had done by trying to push it wrong. And I rewrote it, and that's when the book zipped into being. So I have really been, Margaret, torn between what to write next. I've four cuts too many. I'm doing the copy edits, and it'll be in a week. It comes out in May of 21. And I'm in the process of trying to write 5 bells too many. And then we'll see if they extend that contract. I don't know how many books a year I can balance. Right now, I'm only writing 1 a year plus short stories. But Margaret, I'm going to keep it in mind. You'll be one of the first to know.
Thank you. Thank you, Debra.
Did you run the ideas about the series by your agent and the Sarah Blair character before you started writing?
I got the agent after I started writing Sarah Blair.
Okay.
So no, but I did run the ideas for the books when she started trying to sell them, you know, obviously, because she explained to me, we're not just going to sell one, let's try to sell a few. And so I did run them by her and got some comments there. And I also sent, they took 3 in the beginning. And so when I was finishing up and sending off another group of proposals, she and I did discuss some of them. But for the most part, it's on me. I saw another hand, Pat.
I have a question. When you write your ideas, are you writing a lot? I mean, do you know from the beginning to the end of the book by the time you sort of sit down to write it? Or like your story, you must have kind of a concept to be able to write it that fast. You must have a lot of the little pieces in place. What is your process?
I go to sleep and it comes to me. No, I'm not being funny. I hear a phrase or I see a scene and that jumps me off. In that short story about the little boy, I heard the first sentence in my head and I just started writing and I let the characters speak. I do listen to characters. When I wrote One Taste Too Many, I'm by nature a pantser. And so I started writing it. I know enough, like I did with Maize and Blue when I wrote those 85 pages, I could see a beginning, a middle, and an end. I knew where it was going to go, but I knew nothing about the rest. And I wrote 85 pages that were lousy, that I had to throw out of 80 of them. They were boring. Same thing with when I tried pushing it with One Taste Too Many, it didn't work. Problem is I have a New York editor at Kensington who wants a long synopsis. And I can't just tell him it's going to have a cat and it's going to have, he wants this 18-page thing. So the first time I turned it in, because everybody said you had to write him a long one. So for 2 Bites Too Many, I sent in an extremely detailed outline. Not an outline, paragraphs. And you really could follow the whole story. Only problem is, and he accepted it, but he wrote me back, next time double space. But when I started writing it, something didn't feel right. So I had to write him and say, is it okay if I add another character? Sure. Because another voice was coming into my head. The book I just wrote, that will come out next year, all of a sudden I realized that the character, had to be something other than what we knew about her. So I had to work that in. So no, I can't say that I have it all. A lot of times it's just natural flow. And if it's not working for me, I'm one of those weird ones who subconsciously thinks about it and literally will be, I go to bed thinking about it, and maybe a few days later I wake up and I go, oh, that's the wrong killer. I need to make it this guy. And that is exactly what happened in that other book. So I know people like Jeffrey Deaver, he writes these outlines. Becky Clark does the same thing. These outlines are so detailed that they really have the book. It's almost a first draft. I can't write that way. I don't know how you do it, Chris. What do you do?
Oh, well, I've never had a book end the way I thought it was going to end when I started writing it. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, that's the same.
I'm fortunate that I've had editors that will kind of go with the book and figure it's close enough. I mean, it's close enough to what I said I was going to do.
And I find as I'm getting to know the characters better, like in the book, I know what their behavior is going to do. If I'm like, you will find as you read my books that she's not confident. She's not anything in the first book, but you can see her build, you can see her change. And I think that's very important.
So that gives me another question for you though. What happens when you get to book 4 or 5? And I've run into this, so I'd like to know how you handle this kind of thing. And you've got a situation and you need your character to act a certain way, but she's not going to do it because you've set her up to be a different kind of person in your previous stories. You can't just change her personality to fit your plot like you could with the first book. I mean, you can't change her. She is who she is, right?
Yes and no, because people change a little bit. You can't change her to suddenly being the most confident person in the world, but you can build her confidence and you can have some other motivator. For example, in 3 Treats, like, she's come a long way. She's still not real confident. There's a certain person, another character that can stare her down, and she can still be taken, gives in. But she's getting better at how she's handling the person. But the person still ends up taking as much advantage of her as she took in 2 bites. But you can see that she's getting better. And the reviewers have noted that that's something they like, is the progression, because she either acts out of a little more confidence, or she acts out of a different motivation. And I think that's where you go to answer your question. All of us, my husband fell the other night, and I went to help him get up, and he couldn't do it. And we were working on it, and we got him up, and I pulled a chair. It was the adrenaline. I couldn't put the chair back where I put it. It's a big chair, but I used it to leverage him. And I think that we react and we motivate. So something could happen. A character can do something that they might not do. And then they look back and go, how did I do that?
Have you ever been writing and just had a character just kind of tell you who they are, and they're kind of surprising what they're telling you, who they are and what they're going to do?
Well, in 2 Bites Too Many, I invented a character who wasn't there in anything I wrote before, because I needed her to fill an area that there was a hole. And it wasn't a hole in the plot, it was a hole in the way the community would be. And she fit it perfectly. But, I said, well, should I make you this? And she's going, no, I've come beyond that. So yes, I've had that. And then of course the cat tells me everything. I have to listen to the cat. The cat is controlling.
Absolutely.
But like I said, my cat doesn't think, you know, it only controls in a way that somebody who owns a cat's cat would behave. I'm not inventing, you know, the cat that thinks or the cat that talks. And I think by keeping it real, it makes it something that my readers are enjoying more. I think, Kathy, did you have your hand up earlier? Did I miss a question for you?
Yes, I did. And we all know writing a book is hard. Finding an agent is harder. Mm-hmm. Finding a publisher is even harder. And now you're published. And so what happens to promote? So that's what I wanted to ask you is what do you and or your publisher do to promote your books?
Okay, let me go back all the way through then. For my first one, they did nothing, okay? It was a very small publisher. And the only guidance they gave me was, you know, talk about it. And they put it on their website, which when I look back, was not a website a lot of people were looking at. Okay.
And you're talking about Maze.
Yes, yes, at the time. And so that one, the reason it sold decently, there were 3 of us who were selling well for the house, but we were getting out there and talking to groups and getting on panels and things. The second book, the price point was high, and that can really kill you. You know, for a book like I'm writing, having a $20-some figure is difficult, but their market was more libraries. So I started talking a lot in the libraries because libraries love to have an author come in to do a brown bag lunch, a Friends of the Library, but you have to realize you're not going to sell 1 million books necessarily in a library. You may, if a librarian likes you and they'll buy the book at cost for everybody to read or offer it at cost to them, but most of the people who come in, they're going to want to buy it to check it out rather than buy it. But they want to hear you. And that's fine. Let them meet me. Let them decide they want to read me, because next time they're going to ask the library to order copies. And so, you know, from having nothing in their system, I suddenly had, because people were calling and asking for it, lots of books in their system, because the system is quite, you know, they had lines for it. They did a little more. Now, Kensington is a bigger company. It's the largest privately owned company. They have assigned me a publicist, and they've paid for a BookBub ad for the day before each of these books have come out, the second and the third. The prior one was on BookBub. They made sure they sold the rights for audio, ebook, mass market, and large print. So that helped me. The publicist, when I've asked them, like I wanted to do a Christmas ad on my dime, but they did the artwork for me on the first one, because I thought it would be a perfect Christmas holiday gift. But I don't have the talent to do the artwork. So this time I didn't have to pay anybody. They did it for me. They have gotten, they send me a little thing and they'll tell me that they're doing, they're going to give me this ad, or they're going to put me on this grouping thing, or would I like to write this blog? I've also found there are lots of blog tours and networking. Networking is, for me, been fantastic. People, I have personal blogs that, you know, that I am part of, or that are on my own blog. It's not always a mystery, and I write for 2 others. I will have people guest for me. They will have me guest for them at different times when the books come out. So different audiences are finding me. I'm doing a lot on Facebook because that's my target audience of the type of book I'm writing. I got a lot of readers potentially, but I consider that I started at the bottom level, and I maybe am kind of in the middle, you know, mid-listing. I'm not up here, but each book is getting more readers, and it's doing what it's supposed to do. They're going back and
The first one.
First and second. And I always use Sue Grafton as my best example. I don't know when you met, started reading her, but I bet it wasn't A is for alibi. I was introduced to her as H is for homicide, I is for innocence. What I discovered listening is that she hit it either F and G abroad. She hit it like G here. But once people found her and liked it, they went back to read A is for alibi. And from that point on, all of her books were always on the bestseller list.
And you have 1, 2, and 3 going for you.
Yes, I have one taste too many, 2 bites too many, 3 treats too many, 4 cuts too many comes out next year.
So my point is they'll always know there's one missing if they're collecting you.
Yes. And 5 bells too many is coming out after that with BELLES, because how can I not write a book that has Southern Bells and Mamazillas?
Danielle?
Debra, do you do a newsletter or have your own mailing list that you work?
Yes, I do. Now, I didn't do it well in the beginning. You can all find me. I can type in some of it if you'd like to get on it. I'd love to have you. I have a website, and from the website, you can sign up for my personal blog. You can sign up for the newsletter. I don't inundate people. I'm not, some people, like Tanya Kappas, she does a newsletter every single week, okay? Other people do it every month. I'm more like every 6 weeks to 2 months now. And I was very slow. I've only been doing it for about 8, 9 months now, but I am finding that readers are finding it. And what I'm finding is right now, I'm finding a lot of people are reading that. I'm getting good opening. I find that they find me on the blogs, on the blog tours, but it's all changing. I'm going to try to find this, okay? If I can type, I'm typing and talking to you. But yeah, I think everything you can try to do for promo, let's see, there it goes. You can find everything about me from there and where I am virtually this month and everything. And I do giveaways. One of the things that was interesting for me, and I don't know about you others who are writers out there, I couldn't understand it when I first went with Kensington. At one of the conferences, they asked if we were going to be there. We said yes. And they told me, okay, we're giving you a box of books to give away free. I said, excuse me? My idea, give something away free. I'll give a bookmark. I'll give a flashlight, but not books. And what I discovered, there are 2 kinds of people who come up to you for the freebies. There are people who love to read this genre, but don't want to spend the money to try you out. But then when they like you, they become some of the most loyal fans who pre-order down the line. The other ones are the ones who want to get it and they want to resell it. And you'll see them on the, if you're on Amazon where it says other sources, they've taken a signed copy and they're selling it. But I've really made some good connections with people who fell in love with the books or who have come to see me at some of these things. And Kathy, that was one of the things I was going to say, I have done. I put myself out. Anybody who would let me talk or go, because Maze, once they stopped supporting it, I mean, that was like a book that, it was equivalent to being self-published. I had to talk my way into bookstores. And I was lucky. Once you were there, if I could make you laugh, I mean, if I could tell you a funny story, you might reflect the way I write.
Danielle has a question.
I'm sorry.
Hi.
Yes. Danielle?
I have a question. Hi. I want to know about your schedule and how you're obviously a disciplined person. I want to hear about how you write, or do you write every day? How this marketing, this promo, how do you keep all these balls in the air? And I was on your blog and I want to thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I knew the name. I just couldn't put the face together. Okay, I do a lot of, as you know, civic and volunteer activities. Raised the 4 kids. When I was writing in the beginning, I talked about it, as I said. When I really started writing, I was writing between midnight and 2 or 3 in the morning, and then crashing for 3-4 hours, then going to the office by, between 7 and 8. I don't need a lot of sleep until I crash. So that was it. When I walked away from my judgeship, I was sure I was going to be writing during daylight hours, because I basically was writing a few nights a week and on the weekends at the time. And now I am so disorganized in the sense that, oh, there's a Zoom call, there's a this, there's a that. And so I'm not writing. Those people, like I really admire, like Margaret and stuff, who says they have to get, and Maggie Toussaint, some of the people, they say, I have to get so many words out. Well, I'll sit down, I'll read my emails, and all of a sudden there's an hour gone. And then I'll start answering some PR stuff. And when I'm PRing, like now I'm going to be someplace every night or 2 activities for this next 10 days. At least I'm not getting on planes for a while. I did this a few months ago where I was, I find it hard to write because the adrenaline's up and then I'm tired. So I have to now tell myself that I'm trying to tell myself I need to write every day since I have a deadline. But I have been known to throw a book together. I had, like last time I had 11 months. So I took a month off to read because I like to read, and I just was enjoying myself. Then I took off a month because I said, well, I got all this time left. And then something happened. I mentioned my husband. Well, we had some medical things. So I was kind of busy with that. So I was writing a little bit, but not much. And I had a lot of short stories I had been obligated to write. And then I said, gee, I better get this in because I like to have an editor beside. Some people just used only beta readers. I have a couple of beta readers, but I like to use a private editor to look it over for me. And I looked and I said, I'm due to be on her calendar. So I basically sent her a draft that was pretty crappy. And she's writing back and telling me, I got a hole here, I got this. Is that me or is that you? Anyway, but now, so what I try to do when I'm really into it, that's all I'm doing. Except I'm only doing it part of the day. And
is your husband okay? That's kind of personal. Just wanted to know, is he okay?
Yeah, he's okay. But I'm working on, I really am good when I know I have a deadline. Because I knew I had to get that book in, so it got written. I know I have to, I'm about, the last few weeks, all I've been doing is promotion. And, or copy edits came in. So those take time. And I have to prioritize. And that's something that I find difficult. You have to prioritize. Plus, I'm no longer, as of about a week ago, I'm no longer on the national board for Sisters in Crime. Cynthia Kuhn has taken that position. So I'm done, but I'm still the advisor for the Guppies. I'm over on the SEMWA. I'm still president. So I'm still active on that. And I'm also on the national. So I tend to put those things almost above my writing at times. So I'm not your best friend. Other questions?
Good, Judge.
Oh, thank you all for having. Oh, yes.
Oh, DJ.
Yeah. Hi, Judge.
Hi.
I thought your personal story was really inspiring, and thank you for being with us tonight. I was just curious, now that you've been published several times, how do you continue to interact with your agent, and does your agent continue to help further your career? Is he or she encouraging to you? How does that process work for you?
Yes. Okay. In my case, the agent is very good at placing cozies, and what she will do, she will sit down and discuss with me. When I was, like I said, when I was making my proposals, she would look at them and make some comments about them, or maybe that's an idea that is really oversold right now. And that helps me go back and formulate what I'm going to propose. It was very helpful to me because I found when I did not have an agent, even though I got published twice, as you heard on my story, they were flukes. The first one was an absolute fluke. And I probably should not have gone with that house because it was small. And it was, not to say that I would have been picked up by a big house, because I probably wouldn't have. But that one wasn't as solvent as some other ones. And I just took the first thing because I didn't know better. I didn't know how the game played. And it is a game. Publishing is a game. When I got an agent, because the second book was published because I got a contact at the Killer Nashville. When I got an agent, the agent was able to tell me, no, you need to change this. You need to format a little differently. And she was able to help me going over the book and, just put it in the final form. But she had the contacts. When I would submit, I'd be on a slush pile. When she would submit, instead of being in the slush pile, she had a contact that she'd send it to, this editor, and they would read it. And that was a big difference because it went into certain houses, and therefore then it got some offers for the Sarah Blair series. I took the Kensington offer. They were solid. Like I said, I didn't want to put another house out of business, and I didn't think I could put them out of business. And she's been good about trying, with some of her other authors, she's pushed them to do more series and things. I think, and Donnell, that goes back to you. That's why I only write one book a year and a bunch of short stories. If I was really treating it the way I should, like a job, I have friends who are turning books out every 6 months. And my real writing time on a book is only 3 to 6 months with everything. But I can't bring myself to just do that.
Thank you for that. I admire them so much that they can do that. Margaret and other people who are so prolific, I admire them. I'm doing one book a year. So I know my limitations. Thank you.
Not me, Donnell. Thanks for thinking so, but I only put out one book a year too.
I know, but you're so disciplined. You're just kind of like a Stepford child. So.
Well, thank you, I think.
Meant in the most positive way.
I hope I answered your question.
You did. Thank you.
Thank you.
And I will say, I loved her minute because one of the things from that minute, her stories and things, the twists at the end of the lottery, the O. Henry's twists, those were things that I took away from those stories to use in my stories. Because you need those kind of things, a twist. And in a novel, you're going to have just more twists.
Anybody else have any questions? I think we're a little past our time. I guess I'll just ask one final question if nobody else has one. So what's the one piece of advice you'd give yourself, your younger self, someone that was just like, they hear the voice, they think that they should be writing, other people keep telling them, you can't make a living doing that, you should do this, you should do that. So what's the one piece you would give your, advice you'd give your younger self?
I would probably have told myself to have the confidence in myself that I didn't have, that I could produce something. And I should have probably tried, even between midnight and 2, to have done that back then. I just didn't have confidence that my writing was good enough. And that really, I think part of it is you have to believe in yourself. And I guess that, I wish I had believed in myself earlier, because now I've given myself the chance, I hope, for a 20, 30-year career. But time goes faster now than it did back then.
Doesn't it? Any other questions? Thank you, Deborah, so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me tonight. I really enjoyed being here.